everyone, welcome back to our episode today at Teens for Business. So, this is actually a continuation of our last episode in which we talked about teens and the food service industry. And in this part, we'll be talking about tipping culture. And so, just a little quick introduction. In many European and Asian countries, tipping is actually frowned upon or considered to be unnecessary. However, in the United States, tipping is seen to be a norm, and conventionally, it's very much unacceptable to not tip unless you have a bad experience or you have like a very specific negative circumstance. And usually, most people do leave some sort of tip, and it's usually based on percentage. So, for example, if your meal was $100, you'd leave a much more different tip amount than if your meal was only $25. And usually, most people also leave some sort of tip, no matter how small or large. And that kind of just depends on like how much you valued their service, how much your meal size was, things like that. And what do you guys think about this contrast in tipping between locations?
Tipping culture, if you think about it, it's like, oh, rewarding people because they worked hard, blah blah blah, and it's like kind of sugar coated a lot, you know. Um, but actually, I think because other countries usually have a livable minimum wage, and many restaurants usually pay their workers a good amount of money, that tipping isn't needed, and therefore kind of shows is unnecessary, as opposed to in the United States the federal minimum wage is 7.25, and that's not livable, especially. And a lot of companies are like, oh, if the minimum wage is 7.25, I'm paying 7.25. And since everyone is doing that, workers don't really have an option. And then since tipping is another way for workers to earn money, then there's more reason for the rich people who own these businesses to be like, I don't need to pay you guys because you already get money from tips. So, I'm keeping it at 7.25 instead of raising it to a more livable wage.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's like the tipping is just like paying their we're paying these like restaurant employees income instead of the restaurant owners themselves, just because tipping culture is just like it's so big in the United States. And they believe that yeah, keeping that minimum wage like so low to the point where these workers they basically rely on these tips to get by.
Yeah, I definitely echo those points. I also feel like that tipping has kind of like become like it's like sort of like been adapted like into like culture, as you said, like as said like in like parts of the Eastern Hemisphere, tipping is like frowned upon, but then in the U.S. like it's like a norm. So yeah, I think the argument that could be made is like the argument that Ivan and Kyvan like support about tipping, that it's like uh that tipping is like out attributed to like, I guess, maybe like minimum wage, I guess wage like differences in the Eastern and Western hemispheres. I think that definitely plays a role in like how prevalent tipping is, and like how prevalent it has spread throughout cultures of different societies.
Yeah, those are all good points. And I think also, I forgot who mentioned this, but someone said other countries pay their workers and employees a livable minimum wage. And I think that's true, but also that I'm pretty sure that there's a law that says that restaurant owners can actually pay their workers below minimum wage in the United States. They can pay their workers below the minimum wage in their area. So
Wait,
even if your
really?
minimum wage, yeah, like if your minimum wage, say, like for here, it's around $15 in my county. But if you work at a restaurant, you can actually get paid below, like sometimes in some areas, you can get paid below that number. And because the whole point is that your tipping brings your number up. So you're not even getting paid your minimum wage. You're getting paid a lower amount, and then you have to survive on tips. It's not even an additional thing. It's like oh, I have to get this in order to even meet the minimum wage. So that's just interesting thing. And then I also wanted to talk about a tip jar versus the digital tipping. So I know around a decade ago, tipping jars were much more popular, or like you didn't really see any tablets going around. Now, for many stores, if I go to my local bakery, if I go to my local boba shop or anything like that, they have those little tablet things that they use instead of like a physical cashier kind of thing. And on that thing, they kind of turn it around, they show you the tablet, and then you get to click like how much you want to tip them. And studies have found that some people actually think that digital tipping feels a lot more forced and find it more uncomfortable to refuse because the worker is just standing right there. They turn the screen around to show you, and it's very direct. Versus like a tip jar in the on the side, that's like an actual jar, is much easier to ignore. What do you guys think? Do you guys feel like the digital tipping is more forceful?
I mean, there's definitely more pressure from the times I've seen that happen. Like they have preset options like 0%, 10%, or whatever. And then so it's like easier for you to, because everything's already calculated, it's easier for you to do the job. So you're kind of more pressured to do it on the spot. Plus the worker just staring at you because the tablet's facing you, right? But I can see where the pressure comes from, but um using the tablet I think kind of reduces what a tip is. Now you're being like, okay, before you're tipping because person did a good job, you like them a lot, and you so you give them a little bit extra money because you know they deserved it. But now it's, since it's on a tablet, it's like, okay, it's part of the culture. You better do it, or else you'll be shamed. And the the tipping aspect is more like, I'm paying your wage instead of like, good job, I'm rewarding you.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there's a couple restaurants where you just like ordering even like to go foods like at the front of the cashier. Now they have like the digital pads, and then once you're done checking out, you're just like yeah, they give you the options like 0%, 50%, 25%. And sometimes it's like even though like yeah, I'm taking this out, I'm not even like eating in the store, you still kind of feel you feel obliged in a sense to like not click 0% just because like though it looks bad and like you're kind of responsible for paying their the livable wage essentially. And it's just this sorry, my thoughts. Shit.
I'm gonna be honest, from my experience with the digital tipping, I don't tip unless like I've like I l- until like they've like done something. So like with like tipping jars and stuff, like I get to like tip after the experience, but now like with digital tipping, I just feel like it's like yeah, you're obliged to like kind of like pay their wage or like help them earn more money to like support them. And like I just I just don't really agree with that. Like I feel like they're I don't know, to be honest. Like because like you're like paying their like wage, like they're working hard, but they're kind of exploiting you for money in a sense. The digital for like digital tablets, and sometimes when they like let you like put like the tip in with like a digital screen, like when they give you options, like sometimes I'm gonna be honest, if I just want to be nice and give them some money, I just do it. But other times I don't.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I know, like on social media, like there's a lot of comedy skits of like when they turn the
Yeah.
tablet around and then they're like, there's a waiter staring at you, and then you're like sweating, and then the waiter pulls out a card and said, my family of four is starving, and if without your tip I'm gonna die, or something like that. It's kind of shows like the culture. And the funny thing is like the places that use the kind of digital tablets are the places where people usually don't tip, right? Like Starbucks or a boba shop, when you're literally just talking to someone and say, I want number two, 50% sugar without whatever, right? And that's one of the times when you don't tip. As opposed to like a restaurant, you sit down, the waiter greets you, and then say what you want, it comes back and it does everything for you. And that's where you're more likely to tip. So I think adding that aspect really is like what Jack says, kind of like forcing you, exploiting you to, give them more money.
I feel like the personal interaction also like plays a big role. So like I feel like they've like I a few weeks ago, my friends and I went to Topgolf. We had a pretty enticing conversation with like this like waiter, and at the end of it, I think we gave them a tip because like they were pretty nice. They did all the service that they needed to for us, and that was like good. But like and then a few weeks later with my friends again, like I went to this boba shop and like yeah, with it's like similar to Ivan's experiences. Like there was like a screen where like it's like tipping, but like it's just a simple order, like, and you don't know too much about it, like so like, and plus you when you order like from the boba shop, you honestly you don't know what you're gonna expect because for me at least it was my first time that I went to that like brand of boba shop, so I didn't know what to like expect. So I didn't. So I decided like I don't. I think it's like different. Like I don't think I'm gonna like put a tip until I like know more about it.
Mhm. I mean, I think I will say though, like even though it feels very forced and you feel obligated to give it, I don't think it's necessarily the waiter's fault or the cashier or whoever, like the employee's fault. I think it's more so like the culture of like if you're able to be underpaid and you have to like actually rely on tips to make that minimum wage, like I understand why they would want you to like do it, but at the same time, it's like I think it's more of a cultural thing than any specific individual, any specific business's fault, because of like the rules and regulations around that.
Yeah, I actually did some research just now, and apparently the law that enables tipped workers to earn less than minimum wage is um not in California. So I guess that's a plus. I'm pretty sure it's definitely this type of law is definitely related to political affiliations. And since
Oh yeah,
California is a big blue state, I'm assuming other blue states probably will also exempt the law.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, there are like political aspects involved with like wages because that is like a pretty big deal, and also like affiliations too with even minimum wage itself. Like, do we raise it? Do we keep it? Do
Yeah,
we?
and like California also says that tips must go to the tipped
Right.
employee. Like I know on Reddit, I've seen posts of like waiters being forced to turn over tips to the owner, and then the owner splits it, whatever they do something to the money. Um, that's illegal in California, and for a good reason, right? Because if if it's not the if you're tipping the worker for their good job, but then if it's not going to the worker, then why tip, right?
Right, right. Um, that's a good point, actually. And another point I wanted to bring up is the age difference in tipping. And this might be a little bit counterintuitive, but it's actually been found that baby boomers are, and like older people, older generations are actually better at tipping than younger generations. So, millennials, our generation, we apparently tip at a much lower percentage than baby boomers. And I think that's actually kind of interesting to think about because you would think that baby boomers are usually like more conservative, they're more right leaning, and that like statistically is true actually. But you would think that they're more of the types to be a little bit more close with their money and think that kind of against tipping. But what do you guys think about that? Do you guys think even maybe income differences play a part in that?
Yeah, I was definitely gonna say that their income, but kind of it's just this is like kind of a loop, when I'm pretend like we're like minimum wage workers, and we're being paid minimum wage, and then we get tipped, but not a lot. um and then when we go out to eat, we already don't have a lot of money, and the food is already very expensive. I'm pretty sure you guys all relate to that, but food is getting a lot expensive, especially takeout, and I'm really poor. Why would I tip when I barely have enough money to eat? I think that's a general trend with younger people these days. It's like baby boomers are already financially set. They have social security, they worked a job that paid well, and they have more money and they can spend more, while younger people usually have houses which they haven't paid their mortgage, or like they don't have a house and they're paying rent. They have much more financial concerns as opposed to older people.
Mhm.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I feel like the younger people have to be like stingy with like how they like spend their money, because like you never know, like a lot of like things happen where like you have to like spend money on it. So like therefore like people have to be more careful with how they like spend their money, and like since they like still have like a lot of their like career ahead of them, like they need to find themselves a home and like develop your life until like you earn enough that you can retire and like sustain your life until like you die. Like that's what younger people are like dealing with. So they have to be like careful with their money dealings. However, older people are already they're already like through that process. They're on their retirement plan. They have some extra income. They're getting like social security payments and other like payments, like what Ivan like said. So definitely like, they're like in a different stance of life, and like they can definitely afford to like tip more and like support the I mean like tip
Yeah,
more, like support younger businesses. Yeah.
I agree. I think as a young person, it's like it's sometimes like hard to like you have like it's like I still want to tip, but like it's like how like how much am I should I be tipping based on like I want a budget. I'm not like I don't have that much money. So I think yeah, baby boomers they're kind of like set in the sense that they have the ability to give a tip. So they're probably the generation of people right now that like that is going to tip the most. And yeah, I think it's just mostly how much money do you have and how much do you feel comfortable giving.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with all of that, especially like the fact that as you get older, you usually generate more income and you have more wealth, or up until the point you retire, I guess. But another point of that is, do you think the average teen, so not like anyone especially wealthy, not anyone and especially bad of a financial situation, but just the average teenager in a good situation for like their restaurant, their server, if they did a okay job, they did a good job, somewhere around that. Do you think the teen should be expected to tip around 20 to 18%, somewhere around there? Or do you think that's too high or too low?
Um, I mean, it's culture that I don't think can be changed that easily, unless because since young people are they know, since they're working these jobs, they know like tips are important, especially since the minimum wage is still so low. Um, and I think the average teen will probably shouldn't be expected to tip a higher percentage than 20. I think 20 should be the highest, like logically, because 20 of like if you say you bought $100 worth of food, 20% is $20. And if you add it to your $100, 120, $120, which is, a lot of money already. And teens, they have to make financial decisions, and I think a higher percentage of 20 is not financially sound, especially for teens who are working the same tipped minimum wage jobs.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Also, like I will say, like as you get older, you probably have more money to like give out, and you probably have more life experience that you get to make decisions and be like, oh, this is acceptable, that's not acceptable. Versus when you're a teen or like when you're younger, you kind of just have to rely on culture and what's like what you perceive as what everyone else does. You don't really have enough experience in life to make your own decisions, kind of like that.
Yeah, I think as a teen, um, yeah, I know you still abide by like what Ivan said with like the tipping culture, but 20% sounds kind of high. Just like um I think teens like as in like students, they should be given like some sort of a pass in a sense that like like right now like you don't if you don't have that much like just tip like what you can, right? You don't want to like be tipping when you like don't have the money to like support yourself as well. So like I feel like 20% is a little bit high for the average teen.
Yeah, I mean, like teens with jobs, like I don't think they get a lot of money like from the job. They get like, from my experience, like my friends get around like 15, 16, and that's like not a lot. And because like they have like so much outside, like so much like stuff like that is like I don't know. But like teens are like pretty busy. Like they're not gonna spend like 8 to 9 hours every day. Like my friends don't spend 8 and 9 hours per day like in the job. Some of them spend like 5 to 6, but nobody goes beyond like 8 or something like that. And like based on the money they earn, like that's not enough. And like based on that, they have to make some financial decisions. And 20% like for like a tip is a lot for and like if you're like spending a lot at that place anyway, and 20% tip on top of that, that's like way too much.
Yeah, I think that's true. So now just to really quickly talk about our takeaways from this episode, I wanted to mention the tipping culture as a whole. And Ivan actually made a really good point when he said that you can't really change a culture really specifically and really rapidly. It even if something does change, even if say minimum wage were to increase, you still have that notion of um tipping. Like right now the federal minimum wage is $7-ish, but where I live, like the minimum wage is over double that. So but like it's still frowned upon to not tip if you get good service. So I think that culture is really really difficult to change no matter where your minimum wage is. And even if your minimum wage were to have been increased, you still would face a long time, like at least a few years, decades, really, even to get away from that culture of tipping, just because everyone's so accustomed to it, whether they agree to it or not. But it's just kind of a norm to tip, and that's what's socially acceptable. So I think that's a pretty like big point about tipping, is because if everyone else does it, you kind of feel obliged to also do it, and for good reason right now. But just that aspect of culture is pretty difficult to change.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Culture is one of the hardest things to change. However, like that shouldn't stop us from pushing for livable minimum wage. Like it because of tipping culture, which is by itself not a really bad thing, right? People who work harder typically should get more benefits, will work better, will do a better job. You know, it's logical to give them more money, give them more benefits. But it's this culture is being abused as in companies, big multi like McDonald's, or not McDonald's, they don't really receive tips, but like restaurants are like um people who don't need more money, like the owner who probably earns the most in that restaurant, um, are abusing this to save costs. Like the law that Jackie mentioned, with tipped workers getting paid less than minimum wage because they get tipped. That's the workers are being abused because of a culture that's supposed to be benefiting to them. Like Bennett should be reinforcing better working habits instead is biting them in the butt. So I think definitely we should still push for changes that make workers' life better, but we should definitely wait for the tipping culture to die down after that has happened, since there's a reason to not tip, because once the wage is livable, you don't really need tip anymore. But since the wage right now is not, you kind of have to tip because literally the well-being of that person is dependent on that tip.
Yeah, I agree with those points that Ivan said. I think my takeaway is that like I think my biggest takeaway is that like there's like a there's like a big difference between like jar tipping, like tipping like when it's like, I guess like tangible tipping, like when you like tip on like a receipt rather than like tipping digitally, like tipping like if you like tip on like something like pretty like tangible, I feel like you can get that like personal experience. You get that it's normally you do that like after you've experienced it, but for like digitally, definitely like it sometimes they make it feel like it's like kind of forced, but it's like not like obligatory. It's like supposed to be not obligatory, but like the culture has made it so obligatory, and some people have like taken like some employees have like taken like advantage of this to like kind of like in a way pressure them to like give a tip, and like that's like sort of like paying like their wages, paying like an additional something on their like wages like for them, right?
Yeah, I agree. I just think the entire like tipping culture, like um in America is just like it's so like it's set up just because of the federal minimum wage is so low. So like these restaurants are not like they're not even thinking about like um they're not gonna pay them above that wage because they know that people their employees are gonna receive tips. And that's just how America works. Like as I said, like in European and Asian countries, like people don't tip. That's just they just it's not part of it because they receive a livable wage in those countries. So I just think many of these like teenagers are also like in a sense that like they're relied on to tip as well, which I just think sometimes that's just not possible because they in terms of the income disparity, they just don't make enough to be able to like tip. And even though these employees that's what they rely on. That's my takeaway.
Yeah, those are all really interesting points. Thank you guys for sharing. And that's it for our episode today. So be sure to check back next Sunday for our next episode. And to cap it off, I'm your host, Jackie, and thank you guys all for tuning in to Teens for Business.